Welcome to Vienna. If you're not from here, if you are from Vienna, welcome to the International Vienna Energy and Climate Forum. My name is Jakob Müllner. I will moderate this session. The title of the session is Overcoming the Tower of Babel Syndrome. And it is, the idea from that was not mine. There are a couple of these sessions going on at the moment. For example, at the World Investment Forum, a good colleague of mine discussed the same question with leading academics and practitioners. The idea is that I observe in my daily work that there seems to be a lack of communication between three domains. On the one side, people like me are sitting in their offices at universities doing research that hopefully is relevant, but not always, I have to admit. Other people are sitting just across the river, making important international policy decisions. And other people are then working, for example, in the Ministry of Austria, but I rarely get the opportunity to communicate to them. And I assume, I don't know, but I assume the reverse is true as well. And also, people who implement the ideas that are so important for achieving the SDG goals, the businesses that we have, the remarkable companies like OMV, Siemens, or Doppelmayr in Austria, it's very hard for me, from my perspective, to see what they're doing because there's a lack of communication. And this reminds me of the story of the Tower of Babel, where humanity wanted to challenge gods, building this huge tower, and then God punished them with giving them different languages. And the whole project failed. And to me, SDGs, achieving these goals, is something that resembles the Tower of Babel. It is only possible if we all collaborate. And this session is intended to find ways, discuss how this could be done, and overcoming this language barrier, let's call it. But it's actually more of an ignorance barrier, I think. So that's the setting of this session. By the way, if you're not from Vienna, this famous building from Bruegel is just across the street, so have a look at it, it's really remarkable. We invited a couple of really good speakers to talk about this issue from all of those domains. I'm here the only one representing the research part, the academics part. Bear with me, I'm a social scientist, so I'm not very versed in technical stuff, in natural sciences. I come from a finance background, but I do a lot of research on ESGs, especially in connection with international infrastructure investments. I also invited a couple of Austrian or Austrian-based companies and their key decision makers to the panel. I welcome Brigitte Bichler, the head of OMV Sustainability, Bernhard Bauer, the Senior Regional Vice President of Siemens Digital Industries, Michael Köb, Executive Board Member of Doppelmayr, Henriette Spierer from the Austrian Ministry of Climate. The ministry has a very long name, I must say, so it's the Federal Ministry for Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology. And then finally, thank you for being here as I guess the host of this event from UNIDO, Cristiano Pasini, Director of Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Industrial Development. First, I would like to start the discussion. I've only introduced you with sort of name and affiliation. It would be great if you could briefly talk about yourself, your role within your organization, and what your organization and institutions are doing in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And maybe in this regard, you could also touch upon some of the challenges that you are facing when you work together with universities or policymakers. I think we should start with our female guests. Brigitte, is it okay if I start with you?
Hallo, funktioniert das? Okay. Yes, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation. Hello to all of you. My name is Brigitte Bichler. I'm the head of group sustainability of OMV AG. OMV is an Austrian-based listed company, one of the largest Austrian industrial corporations. We are an integrated oil, gas, and chemical company operating in more than 30 countries. We have 3 business segments: chemicals and materials, fuels and feedstock, where we operate refineries and a large retail filling station network, and the energy business, where we still have the classical fossil oil and gas production, but also developing now low carbon business solutions. And this is now actually the connection to my role. In group sustainability, I'm in charge for defining OMV's climate targets. And with our new strategy 2030, we have embarked in the biggest and largest transformation our company has experienced in the history. We will move away in the long term from fossil fuels and will become a sustainable fuels and zero carbon energy provider with a very strong focus on circular economy solutions, meaning producing our polyolefins from circular feedstock or sustainable feedstocks. Our ambition is to become a net zero business by 2050, and we have defined a really ambitious decarbonization pathway 2030, 2040, not only for our direct emissions, but also for the very important indirect emissions, the Scope 3 emissions from our product use, which is our largest part of the corporate carbon footprint. So being a listed company, ESG, or also the SDG as a blueprint for our sustainability strategy, is extremely relevant for us. And not only because of the regulatory pressure from the EU Green Deal or other regulatory aspects, also because our investors require us to take ESG into account in everything what we do. So we have now integrated the climate targets fully in our business strategy. We have embarked in the transformation. We will invest around 13 billion euros into sustainable energy solutions until 2030. Our board bonuses are connected to greenhouse gas reduction targets, for example. Our capital allocation framework is completely tied to our transformation strategy. And all of this is also driven by myself and by my team, the group sustainability team. So for us, ESG and SDG are at the cornerstone, at the center of our company strategy.
Thank you. If we can just pass the mic on to, maybe we will stick with the corporations if that's okay, and we will move to Bernhard.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Bernhard Bauer. I'm working for Siemens, have been doing that for the last something like more than 25 years in a couple of different continents, also in a global headquarters. And the last 10 years I've been here in Austria. And Austria within Siemens doesn't mean only the country Austria, but we have organized ourselves in a way that more prominent countries in terms of turnover and employees are kind of being the umbrella company for other countries where Siemens is present. So at the moment we are responsible for 26 countries, including Austria. So from Turkmenistan to Poland, and in the south to Israel. That is what we are representing. And I am working in the factory automation, digital industries. What does that mean? We just try to help industrial companies, being it a one-person company up to big companies like OMV, that are producing products that you are going to use then as end consumers each and every day. We are trying to facilitate their production process, having less emissions, more flexibility, higher productivity, and so on, with hardware products and software products. So ESG and SEG, I find that very interesting, because I really have to say that I'm happy that I can say that our company started many years ago with that, and it's really a transition. When I was working in global headquarters, our former CEO introduced something that meant each year reducing the CO2 emissions of your respective business unit. And then, that was quite well on the way, but then somebody came up and said, great, now we have, for example, reduced the CO2 emissions of our own production. But when we think about the product that we are delivering to our business customers, more than 90% of the CO2 emissions that are related to that product do not happen in our production because they come from our suppliers, they come via transportation, and so on and so on. So we have to restart again, you know, because the things that we can control in product design and manufacturing in our own factories is just a fraction of the whole game. So I think that we have been doing the first milestone, maybe, in recent years, but now we have been taking on our shoulders this thing of saying, okay, we should be much more responsible than only our manufacturing. We should be responsible for the product's CO2 footprint, and that is extremely challenging and complex, I can really tell you. So we have a long way to go, and hopefully academics and policymakers are going to help us in finding the right ways in an acceptable time frame.
Thank you. If we then move on to a very different business, no, well, actually not that different. Doppelmayr and Michael, what's your?
Thank you very much. Also a very warm welcome from my side here in Vienna. As Mr. Müllner said as in the introduction, I'm executive board member of Doppelmayr Group, so I'm representing Doppelmayr. Doppelmayr is the world market leader and innovation leader for rope-propelled transport systems. Doppelmayr is a international a group acting all over the world with over 60 local companies, and has installed solutions, more than 15,000 solutions in more than 100 countries in the world. The contact we have to SDGs is transportation. We do transportation all over the world. We have proven concepts for urban systems, which are already existing. We have a proven technology, which is proven over decades. The company exists for over 130 years now. And the first ropeway was installed in the early 1920s. Mobility, we transport passengers on level +1 without barriers compared to other urban solutions, and also with way less soil sealing as we are driving over the city. And also we have inclusive mobility. We are not leaving anyone behind. We have a barrier-free concept. And the third one is energy. We only use one main engine to drive our transportation systems, which is in the main station, and we do not have individual engines on each cabin, which is different to other solutions as well. And the energy per person per kilometer is very low, unbreakable low actually. We have less than 0.1 kilowatts per hour per kilometer.
Thank you. The next two institutions need no introduction, really. Maybe we start with our female panelist first, Henriette.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm from the ministry with a very long name, which is I prefer calling it the Ministry of Magic, which is quite fitting. If you picture the big European Green Deal topics, biodiversity, climate, circular economy, zero pollution, plus finance, plus research, innovation, technology, we're working on all of them. How do we do that? We obviously work with legislation. We are not a lawmaker, that's the parliament, but we prepare legislation in all these different areas. Obviously in something like energy politics, where last year we did have to buy a strategic gas reserve, we have to work very, very closely with companies like OMV, also present on this panel. We also have legislation like the road law. We work on the taxonomy, that's the ESG Connex. But we also plan infrastructures, energy infrastructures, mobility infrastructures. And to just name a third example, and this is by no means all of what we're doing, but we also are the biggest funder of applied research in Austria. So I'm myself responsible as Director General for the last 2 bits in our very long name, innovation and technology. So I have the pleasure of working with lots of companies and lots of academia. I still see the Tower of Babel. We'll get to this later. But at least there's no lack of communication. I wouldn't say that.
Thank you. And last but not least.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Cristiano Pasini. I'm working, you say the host from UNIDO, which is the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. No introduction, because I think you heard a lot about UNIDO today, starting from our Director General very early this morning. But in few words, we actually helping developing countries in their path of sustainable industrialization. Our mandate is 100% embedded in the SDG 9, which is innovation, industrialization, and infrastructure. So we work on a series of number of SDGs, different areas from, on one side, the technical cooperation services, policy advice to governments, and there we intercept with the international policy or the national policies. And what I'm currently doing, since after browsing around 17 years in different developing countries as head of UNIDO over there, is and I'm in charge of the most, let's say, academic part of the organization, which is the Department for Research, Policy and Statistics. And we are dealing with providing, first to collecting information for more than 150 countries about the progress on the SDG 9. We are custodian of 8 indicators of the agenda. And on the other side, we are also framing through our Global Industrial Development Report, the megatrends. We study the megatrends around industrializations, the challenges, and solutions, because this is a forum of solution that we can apply for accelerating specifically industrialization in developing countries. I've been part also of the private sector in my previous life before the UN, so I think I'm fitting well here because I've been private sector, I've been part of the international organizations, and now I'm dealing also in a way with research institution. I agree. There is a lot that can be improved for making, let's say, the barrier more permeable and more effective, specifically for accelerating the SDGs. But I think that's why we are here to discuss. Thank you very much.
So let's get to the point. We've already heard about a couple of things, impediments. Could each and everybody maybe expand a little bit on what makes it hard for you to work together, to collaborate with the other 2 domains, and what could be improved? So I'm connecting now the questions 2 and 3 for time purposes. So what are the problems that you face in this Tower of Babel, and how could we maybe find new and innovative ways to improve on those? Shall we do the same sequence, if that's okay?
Okay, talking about impediments. So I personally don't see big impediments, especially when it comes to the cooperation with research facilities, universities, or scientists. As a kind of, it's a matter of fact that the decarbonization of the economic systems will be only achievable with partnerships along the value chain. So we as OMV, if we decarbonize and stop producing fossil fuels, there will be a big impact on the subsequent value chain. So we have to work together with the value chains after we have produced our energy to come together to decarbonization solutions. One example is carbon capture utilization. So there is hard-to-abate industry sector, they have CO2. We have the potential to support them making a meaningful product out of the CO2, but we can do this only together with research institutes because it's a very new field for us and also for other industry sectors. So we see now we are embarking in a lot of research projects for the decarbonization of our energy products. And this is all new fields. For example, we are now moving into geothermal energy production. It's also a new field. We have a lot of know-how of reservoirs, oil and gas, and this can be then also used for producing geothermal heat. However, there are also new technologies coming on the market. And here we have a lot of research projects ongoing. And I personally have just recently had an engagement with EASA, with 2 EASA researchers who are also one of the lead authors of the 6th IPCC assessment report. And I brought them into the company and brought them together with our supervisory board and our executive board members to inform really the top management on the science behind the targets, because I always talk about that, but you know, the researchers who are really writing the science, they listened better. So this is what I, for example, do on my personal level. When it comes to policymakers on EU and national level, we also have a lot of engagement, especially in the official feedback processes for the policy documents which are under development. What I notice here also in my personal capacity, I have been member of the platform Sustainable Finance, which is the advisory body for the European Commission in developing the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities. Sitting there as one of the rare industry representative from a fossil company, still fossil, I notice some kind of unease. So why we are really talking about sustainable activities, why we joined the discussion here. For me, it's important that the oil and gas sector, despite having a huge contribution to the global climate issue and crisis with our products, we are a problem, but we are also a huge part of the solution. Without the onboarding of the oil and gas sector, the decarbonization will not take place. And what I personally feel is this kind of unease in talking with the still integrated oil and gas companies. I mean, we have a really transformation process ahead of us, and we have embarked on it. And we have already committed to reduce our fossil fuel production until 2030 significantly, and instead produce sustainable fuels. So I would like to see also policymakers looking at the companies like OMV and seeing what they are going to do and how much we are going to invest. And this kind of unease I feel, and I feel sometimes it hinders a bit the open dialogue. Yeah.
I believe I'll do it the other way around. I'll first tell you what I think, what could we all do better in the future from my point of view, and then tell you some examples where we, despite what we could do better in the future, where we have been working nicely together in the recent past. I believe one thing that I at least saw in the last 10, 15 years is I think we all have different incentives. No? We should make profits, we corporates. Politicians should be re-elected. Academics would like to get the Nobel Prize. No? So we all have 3 very, very different things as our, let's say, ultimate target. I believe that that is in it a problem. Huh? And if you just let us go our way, now there will be just a few fields where we are happy to cooperate. Because we would like to achieve our goal, right? So I think also that in the last 10, 15 years at least, that when I look back in the little that I saw is we have produced a graveyard of pilot projects, you know? The graveyard of pilot project is, from my point of view, exactly a result of these 3 different targets, you know? Somebody says, I have increased my R&D rate as a country. No, I've pumped 0.5% of GDP more into that now, so I can say ticked off. A company said, wow, I have absorbed more funding money, great. No? And maybe an academic said, okay, my papers have been mentioned 20 times more than before. So everybody achieved its target, but at the end of the day, the people living in this country, they haven't seen a single thing going on. So I think at least I know a very big company, quite close, that in many countries around the world, this company knows a lot of pilot projects that never have seen the light, but they have all been ticked off by everybody contributing to it. So I think there could be maybe, I mean, I'm not paid for thinking about that in depth, but I was just thinking about what could be a private-public partnership in a project. Now, if the one who is giving the funding money, the one who is doing the research and the one who should bring the product in the market, no? If they are not just getting a funding for a pilot project, but if they are really getting something like maybe they are really creating, let's say, a company and everybody gets its share out, maybe also that would be helping the academic world to fund their future costs and so on. So that could be, but this is a very simple example, now that could be maybe something that binds us, the three of us all together. Do I say now we have a super huge problem and we don't know how to talk to the two others? No, I think we have quite a lot of very, very successful examples. If I talk about Austria, for example, there is a part of Vienna is called the Lake City Seestadt Vienna, which is a new part of the town that has been started a couple of years ago, and with the goal of having a CO2-free new part of the city constructed there. And so we were working there together, Siemens, for example, with the city, with academics, with universities, with research institutes, and I think we achieved quite something. The second example is a more recent one that has been funded nicely out of the money from most probably. No. And the second one is FFG money. Huh?
The first was funded too.
Also, you see, they are great, no? So we don't even know where the money, or me, I don't even know where the money comes from, no? Because, okay, and the second one was about recycling and detecting with AI the best possibility to recycle plastics and metals now out of your normal rubbish that you get now. So that was a cooperation with universities in Austria and quite some companies, and so that was really, from my point of view, a very, very fruitful example where the money came from policymakers, the know-how came from research institutes, universities, and companies, and we all work together. And now we hope, that that is going to see the light of the market very soon.
A very positive story about that, and maybe some more comments also on the challenges involved in that. Maybe that later. We will still have some time, but let's move on to Michael and Doppelmayr.
Yep. Thank you. I would like to pick out one point Mr. Bauer said, that there are a lot of technologies and pilots around which are not given the chance to show what they can on the market. We in the roadway industry, we say we have the right product at the right time because we have a very sustainable product for the moment compared to other transport solutions. And in the past, we did a lot of researching with science, so we talked a lot to science institutions in that field to improve the product, also improve the thinking on urban solutions. And there are good examples where the cooperation worked very good, very well, also between science, politics, and industry. For example, in France, there are two big projects, not only Doppelmayr projects, I'm talking about the industry, in Toulouse and in Paris, which worked very well, but where needs and requirements were defined and given to implement this product as an urban system, as a sustainable mobility and transport system in an urban concept. And for us, it is a little bit that in this triangle you showed before, industry, politics and science, the screw which needs to be turned a little more is the political decision making. It takes a very long time in our industry that decisions are taken which solution is the best solution for the mobility, for sustainable mobility and transportation in public transport. We have a proven concept, we have a proven system and technologies which is accepted all over the world as an urban system. And also Europe is going there. We see that in Paris. This is the next big urban solution for roadway transportation, which will be installed the next 2 years. And we are very fast in installation of such a public transportation. It's from scratch to turn the key around about 2 years in average. As I said, there is way less soil sealing for that, so we are very sustainable on that as well. And but the decision making in the advance is very difficult, because what we need is a frame for the needs, the requirements, the budgets, and the timeline. And if that is given by the political side, I think it would be much easier to have those projects in the cities in Europe realized.
Thank you. Maybe one of our policymakers to reply.
Yes, policy, as I had to emphasize before, because sometimes in Austria you mix up politics and policy. And I'm really adamant on the fact that I'm here as a policymaker. The common challenge we're all facing is speed and scale. And really just to take climate, because this is very prominent and was also mentioned by the other speakers before, from the moment from Paris, basically, from the moment of the Paris Agreement, December 2015, was very quickly ratified in Austria. It was actually clear where we're headed. But it took quite a long time for this to trickle down. Because what I always say, and this is kind of my hypothesis, first of all, I would really like us all to work as if we took these targets seriously. This might sound a bit weird, but actually if you think about it, it actually means transformation was mentioned before. It actually means a complete transformation in all the different organizations we're talking about. Industry, research, the public sector, because the Tower of Babel does not only apply in this funny triangle, but also, of course, inside the public sector, inside different departments, because there are people, right? We have a federal system in many countries over the world, where you have a national level, you have regions, you have cities, then you have administrations, you have big departments, you have units, and in all these you have people, and all their individual incentive systems, because you very rightly mentioned this, are also different. What you mentioned before, I call an input logic. And I really do think that in whatever we do, in all these different organizations, we need to get to something I call an impact logic. And that, just to take the example of research funding, because you mentioned the graveyard of pilot projects, that really means a completely different way of working for the lot of me, because then suddenly, for the people I work with, their incentive is not to spend all the money I have negotiated and to make sure that it's more money so that we can, raise our research quota, whatever comes out in the end, right? But really to think about the different topics we fund, climate neutral cities, Aspen being one example, the circular economy, mobility transformation, energy transition, to name just some. I also have space in my portfolio, by the way. To really think, and we actually did that, we worked on impact pathways to really think what's the problem we actually want to solve, what are strategic objectives, specific objectives, what are instruments that we have, and what are outcomes, outputs, impacts. Everyone hated me, rest assured, when I made people work in this way, right? And then to make sure, and this is the real difficulty in relation to the speed and scale, that on the one hand, research in this case really contributes towards achieving all these objectives we have. And these are quantitative objectives. You can really calculate what it means to reduce our footprint in this, that, or the other until 2030 by X%, until 2050 by Y%. That's really, these are massive, quantitative, very serious targets which really change the way we work, also change the way we invest. We actually have to think on the public side, I think, much more like a kind of portfolio investment company than we currently do. So on the one hand, you have to contribute to these targets, but on the other, for the research, obviously, you also have to think beyond, because we, as humankind, I'm personally convinced we are not driven by the world is going to pieces scenarios, but we are actually, I guess, driven by finding out new things and coming up with new things, coming up with new innovations. And obviously research universities always have to go beyond the status quo as well. And there needs to be room for that as well. So what we're doing at the moment, and I think it's just not enough, we obviously have all these pilot projects, we bring research and industry and ourselves together, and we have lots of well-working pilot projects and some graveyard projects. What we do have to do, though, is to really turn every stone, and that means for people to work differently. In our context, it means that people in different departments need to talk in another way with each other. There should never, ever be the unease you described earlier. That's really something that we have to overcome, because you will not end up at a solution if you do not talk to everyone. And I think, just speaking for Austria, there are certain rituals, and I think you have that in every organization. There are certain rituals you have when you come up with a planning project or a new law or whatever. And I'm sorry, I do not think that these rituals are fit for the future if you look at things in terms of speed and scale, because it just takes too long, it's too rigid, and I think research and innovation projects can help us to show solutions, to make things possible, but at the same time, we have to speed up, right? And I think you do already, maybe not for you, because for a politician, I'm really saying politician now, it's obviously quite difficult to deal with the, whatever, 200,000 households living beneath one of your systems. That's the usual debate, I guess, you're getting, at least that's the kind of debate I know from Vienna. But you do see that in a lot of legislation now, this kind of speeding up, especially for priority energy transition projects. And these are hard trade-offs, because there's a trade-off between protecting the environment and building up energy. But I guess we are getting there. And one very important question I want to end on for this part, I'm working with this a lot, because you talked about transformation, and I think it's all about organizational transformation inside all our organizations. And a very important question, it's a very easy question, you can also use it in your private relationships, is what do you need? What do you need? What do you need to actually take your next step? I really like this question, because it's solution-oriented, and it really helps us to find this common language we need to find in order to get on. So if you ask me, Jakob, what do you need? I would say, I do not need a 200-page report. I do not need a 200-page study. I need a brief policy brief. You'd probably get the same answer from the industry. And that's already something, because I used to be head of science at the Environment Agency, and we came up with 200-page reports. And it's a skill, and it's something you have to learn as a researcher, to really condense your knowledge to something that is then actionable. Just a tiny little example, but you can basically work on a lot of things that are based on asking each of us, so what do you actually need to get closer to our common goal?
I like that. I will use this in my private relationships as well. It sounds good.
That doesn't work with teenagers. Disclaimer.
Well, I mean, it's quite inspiring for me to listen. It's at this dialogue that exists between government, research institutions, and private sector here in Austria. And that's make me feel very positive about the Agenda 2030, because this is what we're here for, transforming our world. But I have to be a little bit negative, because I think if I have to segment, I still think that Austria is a special case. And the country I've been working and living, this dialogue is not existing. I worked in countries where the private sector and the government, they were not talking to each other on key issues like job creation, imaging for the decarbonizing the economy. And the reason was governance, the reason was political issues, the reason was the view of certain level politicians that think that the private sector was just an entity to regulate, not to incentivize. And there was no communications. And that's between two elements of the three. And then looking at the university, I found always in developing countries, middle-income countries and LDCs, the capacity of the university is very low sometimes. So the quality of the products and the research tends to not be up to the standards for the policymakers. So there is a huge need also to increase research, innovation, support to this university to improve. And the same happens for the government officials. I mean, I'm pretty sure that here in Europe and Austria, where sustainable development is taken extremely seriously, and I can see the progress. You have also a very qualified public administration that can understand the complex message coming from research, also in the face of policy brief. The experience we have working in LDCs and middle-income countries, that this is not the case. Often I talked with ministers, incredibly skilled, very well educated from Western universities, and then I go down to a level to director generals or the staff. And the reason is that they have much less, let's say, preparations, capabilities, as we say. So there is a huge need of capacity development to make sure that the key message, at least for talking about decarbonization, what is needed for decarbonization, for job creations, for ending hunger, everything, there is a huge need also to simplify the message, to tailor it, to make sure the capabilities are created. So this is, I mean, it's at least from our experience, the challenges, no? Also, I mean, I very much feel what you're saying about what is needed for the next steps to progress. And I'm now dealing also with preparing global reports, and we're discussing very much in our team, we need to make it actionable. And we need to have key messages. We need to use this for policy advice to developing countries. We cannot have, it's good to have a report of 200 pages that gives all the methodologies, what we've studied, the collaborations, but it needs to be useful for our member states. So we need key messages, and this is all based on communications. And this is extremely important, because if you don't extract the key messages, then the politicians or the policymakers cannot action that. On the other side, I often lived in developing countries that the policymakers don't want to listen to academia. And they have let's say, political views about certain issues. And they are somewhere tendency against evidence-based policymaking, which what we are actually advocating. To take a decision, to provide the policies, you need data, you need statistics, you need a model, you need to project a policy idea, and you need a debate, you need a dialogue between the public and the private sector, you need a dialogue with academia. And what I notice, and this is a challenge specifically for developing countries, is that minister wants to be action-oriented, and this is take time, coordination take time and cost. And sometimes they don't have the time because they have other pressures. So there are different layers, and I think what could be a solution. First, I mean, that's global for everybody. Breaking the bubble tower, the wall in the bubble tower to talk between us in a language that everybody can understand, either in policy brief on others. With the private sector, I found the collaboration always very, I don't know, maybe because we work on sustainable industrialization, very much easier on certain aspects when we need to support specific topics. I mean, sometimes private sector owns the technology that is very much needed for developing countries and support in this regard. But also, as we have heard, we have different goals. You have to maximize your profits or stakeholders' satisfaction. We have, at least the way to support the developing countries, government has to increase the rate of research in the GDP, and academia wants to win I like this one, the Nobel Prizes. There is I think, to understand, and this is, I think it's the, for me, the most inspiring thing about the Agenda 2030, that has been created to break the walls. Because it was an evolution from the previous one, which you probably don't remember, were the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. You remember, for those who were in the policy making. And it was incomplete, because it was talking all about social issues. And where about the economic issues? What about the environmental issues? The SDGs solve this problem. And then everybody says, it's in holistic agenda. That's what the word we use in the UN, which means you cannot break it. You cannot say that I will accelerate the SDG 9 because this is important for the others. No. There is, in the moment you accelerate one SDGs, you're losing the view of the agenda. It's everything together, it's everything interconnected, the economic, the social, and developmental dimension. Which means that we need everybody on the table. We need the private sector, we need the academia, we need the government. Without that, there is no hope. And that's also for us a lesson learned, because it took time also, the message, to enter also within the UN. There was a very high skepticism to sometimes to work also with the private sector within the UN. Since, I mean, if I think about when I started the UN system, working with the private sector was a sort of weird stuff to do, no? Because they were seen sometimes as the source of the problem for the sustainable value chains and the way, the labor rights and stuff like that. But then they're part of the solutions, and they need to be part of the solution. So that's what is, I found very inspiring, this experience from Austria, really, honestly. And I hope that I can showcase probably in the efforts that we're doing to developing countries to show, okay, there is a way of doing it, especially for bringing together the private sector, the academias. And I don't think it's a bad, really bad issues that you have a graveyard of pilot projects. At least you tried innovation. I'm worried when there is no pilot project. Means that there is no permeability between research, policy, and private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me wrap this up a little bit and provide an academic perspective to that. I think most of the speakers talked about at least one of three rather, let's say, very, very high-level human traits, right? We heard about skepticism when a company commits to becoming a zero emissions company. We heard about rituals, how processes are being done in a culture like Austria, how projects are being developed. We've heard about incentives, also a human trait, and how incentives make collaboration dysfunctional. And many of that I also see in my academic work. Just to give you an example, like the ritual in Austria is that education is here for everybody. You go to your studies, then you go to practice and you work. It's only a recent phenomenon that people from work have returned to universities. The concept of lifelong learning, CEOs being briefed by scientists on the latest developments, that's something that is very refreshing to hear that this is taking place, but this is still very frowned upon by many because it's considered a weakness if you are a seasoned CEO to go back to university to hear something. So these kinds of skepticisms, they exist also in my world, and they impede what we can do, because I can educate students, bachelor students, about SDGs and about sustainable finance, but until the time when these students will be the decision makers of the future, it's too late. So either we start a dialogue on top, because we need speed, we need scale, or it's too late from an academic perspective, right? The second one is incentives. My incentives are that I publish papers in academic journals. I don't get any reward for participating in a policy conference. My university wouldn't pay for my travel here. The incentives within your academia are purely in a way that I maximize my impact in the number of citations I get. And how do you maximize the impact? You cite as many people from the past that you know. And that's how you maximize your impact. It's not forward-looking. It's not how relevant your research is. It's about how impactful in citations it is. And that's a completely skewed incentive. And there needs to be a lot of rethinking of incentives within academia, I think, to encourage more things like the initiatives we've heard, right? And the last thing that I wanted to add, I think we had skepticism. Well, rituals. Rituals is also such a thing. There's, I think, I'm a finance scholar, so I think the first ritual in the Austrian world, maybe in the German-speaking world, is always to prioritize public funding before private funding. Other cultures are much better at accessing private funding. If we want to achieve the scale and the speed that is needed for SDGs, we must really get more private funding into SDG-related investment. And this requires a lot of changing of culture. This requires a lot of better communication and a lot better PR for this movement. I mean, you've read the news, green bonds are growing, and this is a growing movement, but there's still a lot of skepticism in the private sector, especially among institutional investors. For example, I mean, many of the people who are running big portfolios for hedge funds, they've been educated by people like me talking about portfolio optimization. And the cornerstone of portfolio optimization is that it doesn't matter what the company you invest in looks like, because you're an investor, you've diversified away all the risks that are related to a company. That includes externalities, environmental damage, and many other things. So there's a complete dogma out there that sort of does not encourage external funding of these projects. And that is also something that where I think academia would have a very important role to play, to show empirically and then advertise this, that there is something beyond profit maximization and portfolio optimization that is relevant for the planet and for everybody. So I hope I was able to wrap this up a little bit in a structured way. We've gone a lot over time. We have a few more minutes for open discussion. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question or comment?
Thank you. This is a really interesting panel, and thanks everyone. So a quick background, I'm Kavita Surana, and I'm an academic now, previously in the private sector, worked with international organizations and from a developing country. So I have a lot of interesting questions for all of you, but I wanted to pick up on this point of what do you really need. And in some of my previous work on policies, something that I learned was that I don't really know how to write a policy brief that would be useful to you. So, figuring out which policy, which document, which policy, what is the evidence, and writing a sentence that extends this policy for that long because this is the evidence is just a skill that most academics fundamentally lack. So what do you suggest in building that capacity in the academic world to be able to simply talk to you and give you that information? Not just something that I can do as an individual, but in a broader level. Thanks.
Kavita, most civil servants also lack the skill, so don't worry. Because really, I mean, it's about trying to find the gist of something you worked on and transport it to another person, right? That's really who said that? It's PR. You need more PR. It's really a PR skill, huh? Which most people don't have. I think there's a couple of ways. Things that seem to work quite well, and I can only speak for the European research area. This is obviously only only Europe, is embedding researchers. Embedding researchers in a civil servant context. There are programs that do that. I think that's very useful. I really, to give a very practical advice, I really like the apolitical.org network. It's a UK-based network that's actually geared towards policymakers, and they offer a lot of courses, which I always share with my colleagues, because we usually don't have that much budget for lifelong learning, so I'm always looking for free resources. And they offer a lot of courses on how to write good policy briefs, how to negotiate, how to come up with projects, do planning in the public sector. And what I really like about them, and this is also relevant for UNIDO, is that they're a worldwide organization. So you get examples basically from India, because that's where you're from, but also from all sorts of other different countries. So I think that this question is not, it's really important for me to not use it as an attack, but you really use it as to kind of find a common ground, and it always starts within your own organization. Because I've been asking my own staff for the past 2 years, so what do you actually need? So why do you need this information? What do you do with this information if you have this information? What do you do with this or that project? And very often, because we live in this world of input logic, what you talked about earlier, not even this public sector in my case is very clear on what they actually want. So it's a very good co-learning journey.
Anybody else wants to chip in?
No, I second very much what you say. I mean, it's what I'm trying to do with my team. What I noticed when I arrived after many years outside here in Vienna is that I noticed that everybody was very much close in their office and doing very well their work. But I think that I believe in multidisciplinarity and teamwork. If you put together, and the very senior manager told me, if you want to have a policy brief that it's very useful for a politician, think like a politician. So, and you cannot do it because you're coming from academia. So the best way, work together. Learn the way they're seeing the world, the same with the private sector. If you want to create something that is useful, specific for these people, you need to open a channel of dialogue. It means you need to get out from your office. You need to have a multidisciplinary team. You need to invite them and discuss. And that's how the product will become absolutely valid. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments on that, or do we have room for another, or time for another question?
Thanks. It's actually a comment. I hope it's okay, and maybe forgive my naivete. I'm Marcus Fischer. I'm here for the UNICE-supported expert group on resource management. But maybe just because the panel is about innovation, I was just thinking one idea, how to make a 200-page document relevant for policymakers. Just put it into generative AI, like ChatGPT, and tell it, summarize it in 10 bullet points. And I think we are moving into a direction where it will be very uncommon to read full documents, because it will be just generative AI either summarizing them for us, or we sort of letting things summarized. So I think maybe have that in mind too.
And the two policymakers on the panel immediately said, we tried. First thing we did, of course.
We leveraged the tool.
Did it work for you?
Not entirely, honestly.
Yeah, not entirely.
Because the subject that it was extremely technical, and sometimes no. I mean, he gave some good hints, good suggestions, but it didn't work still sometimes. I don't know for you.
No, we're also piloting, and there's actually two ways we look at it. First of all, AI is one of the very good examples where we say we take these objectives seriously, and we came up with a new program called AI for Green. So please come up with, and I think the project you mentioned is also part of this program, maybe. Use AI technologies for greening the world, basically. And the second one is basically piloting on our portfolio of different projects and really letting it run over it and just try and find the gist of actionable advice. And we're in a pilot stage because what we're really interested in, to name a very concrete example, is, I don't know, we're always talking about having to build up the energy infrastructure, or really there's a lot of building to do. On the other hand, we had so many research projects for the past 15 years on the benefits of digitalization. And we do have to kind of bring the builders and the digitalization researchers and all their project partners together, because maybe you do have to build, no question, but maybe you don't have to build as much if you use all the project results we already have somewhere in our cupboards. And yeah, so thank you very much for your really relevant advice. We're working on it.
Let me just say one thing about policy briefs. I'm writing a policy brief right now, but for me, as a researcher, this is lost time in a career sense, because this is something I'm not even allowed to put into my CV. It will not appear anywhere, it will not be cited anywhere. So it would be good if there were a system where if a researcher does a very good policy brief that is then cited in political conferences or something, gets an impact from it.
I'll give you an example though, because well, we dish out basically most of our funding budget via to the funding bank and the research promotion agency here in Austria. And and this is about people having to work in different ways. I'm in a bit of a discussion with these guys at the moment, because I'm saying, well, look, the first thing, publish all the reports. Transparency is the first step towards impact. And the second thing, really think about what you ask from these projects, you know. Maybe you do not have to ask for the 200, the researchers will write their papers anyway because they have these incentives. But maybe don't ask for a 200-page final report on the project, but ask for a 5-page policy brief, for a 7-page technical brief, giving already instructions on how to do it. And maybe also 1 page that explains your grandmother what the project actually does, which is then for the PR people, right? And the politicians.
Good, thank you. Any more questions? Any more words? Anybody wants to close the panel?
I know it's late, but since AI was mentioned, I cannot hold to myself. No? Maybe it sounds a little bit weird if that comes from a corporation, but what I would like to have as a next step, I mean, not maybe rather from you nationally, and the EU has been doing already something with the AI Act now, which is definitely worldwide, I think, one of the things. We need containment. I believe that we all talk about AI, to help us make a 200-pager become more digestible for somebody who should say something. But AI is also the one that is flying drones and shooting people from distances that have never been able before, and you can do that out of your garage. You can do with AI, you can do DNA sequencing that you could never do before as a person, and you couldn't do that 10 years ago. So I think there is also the dark side of AI. And the dark side of AI, it's wrong to leave that in the hands of us corporations, because, you know, what we are driven by is, at the end of the day, at the shareholder value. Yeah? We will think about in the afternoon on Sunday, yes, that there is something else, no? Maybe, but the ultimate goal is to optimize our profit. The researchers, they will just say, you know, I found a much better language model now, that a large language model that is even better than the one before, and I can make your 200-pager a really crispy 2-pager one. But what I believe is, what I would have as a next step is, I would have 2 things I would like to have from policymakers and more the international ones. And I'm happy to be in the EU to have something that is containing AI. And the second thing was already mentioned before. I think the we is bigger than me. So we all have to take some people, and not only the ones that have the stars and stripes on the shoulders or for their seniority or their position, but the one with the bright eyes of our institutions that have knowledge and also stars in their eyes for the subject of the SDGs, and try them to work out something that helps us all together. So that would be, I'm always so, I have 2 wishes. The one is with the AI containment, and the second one is having the star-eyed in a team. Thank you.
Any more wishes? I mean, I
can invite him because we are launching a global alliance for artificial intelligence as UNIDO, so I will invite you. So it's as a department and division. So we have a full department of digitalization and artificial intelligence, and then now is globally launching this alliance specifically to see the dark, to try to avoid the dark side, like you very skillfully put. But it's something that is very much on in the international agenda now. I was reading an article today on the Financial Times that many AI big shots now, they, I think, convened in Paris and discussing at least to start working on that on the international level.
And 28 countries in Milton Keynes, though. That's one of the most terrible places you can be. So, sorry, I hope no one's from Milton Keynes, but Vienna is nicer to talk about this. So they're just now discussing what your first wish. 28 countries, international.
So if there are no more questions or comments, I'd like to say thank you, not only in my name personally, but also from the WU. It's really refreshing to talk to companies and policy institutions. Please, let's continue to keep the talk open, and yeah, I hope to see you again on another panel sometime in the future.